let's talk about Marvel's Netflix show Iron Fist. Good old Danny Rand, the martial artist. Now, before I get into this, I'm probably not going to touch upon the controversy about those claiming that Danny Rand ethnicity should have been changed to be Asian instead of what he was in the comics as, Caucasian or white. He goes over to Kunlun. He learns to be a martial artist. He defeats the dragon. He gets his Iron Fist. That's the story. I have his first appearance somewhere in my garage, which, I wish I had the first appearance of Spider-Man instead, because then I could buy a new car. But, the first appearance of Iron Fist isn't that bad. But anyway, so let's talk about this Netflix series. But first, I'll just let you know that I really like Daredevil Season 1 and Season 2. I think I prefer Season 2 over Season 1 a little bit. I enjoyed Luke Cage first half more than the second half, but it was still a good show overall. Jessica Jones, I felt like homework. I actually liked the first half a decent amount, and then I thought it was about 5 episodes too long, or 4 episodes too long, where it was just dragged out so much with what is it, the Purple Man, David Tennant's character. It's like, oh my god, just kill the guy already, just snap his neck. And I think that's one of the problems with these Netflix series. Overall, obviously they're very good. It's always good when you have multiple shows with Rosario Dawson. I can't complain too much there. And they're mostly respectful and faithful to the source material. But they are all arbitrary, 13 episode seasons. And I don't know if that's good. I don't know if it's always works to the benefit of shows to have this set length where you have to have 13 episodes. Because that's a lot of filler you have to put in. Say your main story arc's only 8 or 9 episodes long, and then we got to fill out with other bullshit that weaves in and out that might not be interesting, or may not, it may not be enough time for complete story arcs, to shove in these little subplots where it does, you might think it's good to have more and more content, but not all the time. Brevity sometimes makes sense when it comes to these series. So it's harder to judge something like Iron Fist because of that. But I think that the show's writing was not strong. One of the other strong points of the other series that you had a very good and clear origin story for Daredevil. It was spaced out. You got the full origin. Luke Cage, it was revealed as well. For Danny, you get bits and pieces of an origin, but not really. They replay. This, by the way, this is spoiler heavy. Spoilers. They replay constantly throughout the series as part of him having PTSD, which was a main sort of part of the Danny character in the series. That he couldn't get over the death of his parents through we learned that was set up, the plane coming apart and the plane crashing. Which, that wasn't, again, another unclear plot point, which there's so many, but just David Wenham's character. David Wenham's probably one of the highlights of the show. He played Harold Meacham. If you find out that he poisoned the pilots that Danny and his family was on, somehow then that causes the fucking plane's top to come apart, and and then his mom gets sucked out of the top of it. Again, really weird writing, but you're constantly flashed back to that. You get maybe 15 seconds of Danny in the snow, in the Himalayas, wherever he's at, crawling around, finding his dead father, 2 monks finding him as well. That's all well and good, and you get like maybe 10 seconds of seeing him getting beaten with bamboo by the monks to train him, but you don't see any martial arts training going on with him as a child. You don't see any teachings from him as a child or even as a teenager. When he's in this series, he's 25 years old, and he's trained for 15 years since he was 10. So you could have shown grown-up Danny Rand even years before, say 20 years old, played by the same actor, still training, seeing what his regimen is, hanging out with his friend, who does show up. Oh, is it Dravos? Is that his name? Excuse me, Davos, showing up there, and really having this person, seeing how Iron Fist becomes the man that he is, how he discovers himself, how he gets over. Well, you find out he never gets over the grief of losing his parents, but at least attempting to. That transition period as a child, we see none of that as an audience. So in some aspects, it's refreshing that we're not encumbered with the origin scene of Iron Fist and Danny Rand, and you don't see him defeat the dragon. You don't see him get the actual Iron Fist power. They change it just to being a straight chi. I mean, you see a couple of glowing dragon eyes at one point, but they really sort of shortchange the origin, and at the same time, though, don't give the audience much of a chance to connect to the character. So when you first see Danny in the show, he just shows up like a bum on the street, and fights off some guards, and he sees the Meacham duo, brother and sister, Joy and Ward, and that's how you're thrown into the deep end with the character. And I don't think, unlike someone like Iron Man, where you see him go from being this asshole rich guy to redemption through escaping his captors, building the original Iron Man suit, you don't get to see that with Danny. You don't go on that journey, and the bits and pieces that you see along the way, frankly, are not enough, at least for me, in order to really get a good hold of the character. And Iron Fist is to me even a degree below, definitely, Daredevil. If Daredevil is like a B plus character in the Marvel universe, Iron Fist is like a C plus character. So I think it's to the audience's benefit that they would have gotten a better feel for Danny, who he was, and his origin. If not in the first episode, within the first 3 or 4 episodes. And I was expecting that to happen at least throughout the way, like they did with Luke Cage, where eventually they did show the full origin. With the prison sequences and what went on there and the experimentation. You don't get that with Danny. And I think that an audience is disappointed if they don't see that. You see a guy show up, do his kung fu, that's great, but where did he come from? We understand his parents died. We've seen that 1,000 times in the 13 episodes. But what was the journey that Danny went on? Everything was just not developed along that path. And then, of course, you really don't get a clear notion of seeing him struggle to leave Kunlun and come over to New York City. You don't see any of that journey at all. So it's really Marvel doing something different, and it doesn't work out that well to me. In terms of the portrayals overall, I think they were okay. Finn Jones, I think, did all right with what he had. He showed to be a somewhat competent martial artist. I think Jessica Henwick as Colleen Wing was very strong. I talked about Rosario Dawson before. David Wenham as Harold Meacham. Sort of the spoilers again. He's the main villain. A little nuanced. You see all the twists and turns of his character and the nefarious nature coming a mile away, but he's still a good actor. Good old Faramir from Lord of the Rings. I think the standout was probably Tom Pelphrey as Ward Meacham. He goes through like 3 or 4 different character arcs throughout the season. He starts off, wanting to kill off Danny in order to impress his father, show that he can do it without his help, against his wishes. He goes through all the struggle of, never getting his father's acceptance, and his father, treating him like garbage. He ends up finding the strength to murder his father, who ends up coming back, trying to then, eliminate his father again, and then Danny, and then he's always looking for that strength that he thinks he has, but it doesn't exist. On top of that, he has an opiate addiction, which is good to see, in a Marvel show, because that's a huge, it's a more and more simmering crisis in America. The huge opiate and painkiller addictions that we have in America, and he showed that off, and then that turned into a heroin addiction. So there was it was not the cleanest, I think, writing there was a little bit too much going on with Ward's character, but that was to me the most interesting arc out of any character in the season, even more so than Danny Rand's character arc, which I thought was drawn out and a little too simplistic. You know, the PTSD of his family dying and not being able to harness the chi for Iron Fist. I mean, that's really what his character arc really was. Yeah, finding his place in the world, deciding to stay. Sure, I get that, but you know, that's more easily resolved to me, and that's something that didn't take 13 episodes to go through. Ward's character, you know, I thought was the most interesting throughout, and I think Tom Pelphrey did a great job with that. But overall, though, I thought the writing wasn't there. I just don't. The final episode was a letdown in terms of what they built up to. It just seemed like after they had some really not super elaborate fight scenes, and I'll get into that real quick as an aside. The fight scenes I thought were fine overall. People were talking about how the first one was bad when Danny was in the hallway, you know, fighting, trying to compare it to the Daredevil fights in both seasons where, you know, there was the hallway fight and the one in the building where it was like one shot following it when he fought off the two different gangs. And yes, that was done very well. This was not done as well. It absolutely wasn't. That's the direction, more so than the writing and the choreographers there. But the fight scenes, they get better. When they fight off the Hand, the fights are better, especially the Hand students, when it's Davos and Danny fighting them off together. And then one of the highlights was probably the Highlander-esque fight between Colleen sword fighting against what's his name, one of the leaders of the Hand. Which one was it? The Sensei. I forget his name off the top of my head. Bakuto, who I thought did a pretty good job. That was one of the highlights. A good old-fashioned in the rain, katana fight. I thought that was pretty good. But the fight scenes are, not what I want to hang my hat on if I'm doing a Marvel series. It has to have decent writing and decent characters. And again, I think the actors did what they could, but the writing just wasn't there for the character of Danny Rand in particular. And he's the hero. He's the one you want to follow, but he wasn't that interesting to me. He seemed like a man-child to me in that he made some stupid decisions, impetuous decisions, and the writing wasn't also consistent. So let me give you one example off the top of my head. Madame Gao shows up from Daredevil, also part of a faction of the Hand that she leads. And then we see Danny, probably one of the better highlights of the show is when he has to fight off 3 different opponents, a challenge from Madame Gao in order to free this woman held captive. And at the end of it, Madame Gao, forces Danny back with like some sort of energy force from her chi that knocks him back. And that's the only time you see Madame Gao use that power. And then later on, she's captured by Bakuto's side of the Hand, and then she's locked in a normal room. It wasn't even like a jail cell, like just walls and a door. And what happened to her power to use that chi to force her way out? It's just inconsistent. In the last episode, we had a hilariously, I thought, bad sequence between Danny and the Meacham father, Harold, where he's chasing him with a handgun, trying to shoot him. And they're just like talking back and forth, the arguments like, oh, it was like the most cliche thing where it's like, oh, you did this to your family. No, you tore my family away from me. And it's like the most cliche thing where you have 2 characters yelling at each other, one with a gun trying to kill the other one. But there's one moment where Danny sneaks up to him and then kicks him in the face with like a backward somersault jump kick and knocks Harold to the ground. And instead of pressing his advantage and like knocking him out, grabbing the gun or struggling. And by the way, Harold is not like a big martial artist. Yeah, you see him like knocking a heavy bag around, but he never, he doesn't have the skill that Danny has for sure. So instead of the fight ending right there, for some dumb, stupid reason, Danny decides to run away from the guy, Harold, and let him get the handgun and pursue him again. Just for the sake of the script versus it making any fucking sense at all. I couldn't believe I saw that. That was just insane to me. And then, of course, Danny has problems, like it's always written for convenience, where he has problem fighting off a non-martial artist at the end, wielding this, I think he had like a pipe or something. And it's like, come on, Danny's taking care of like 5 guys at once. He could have handled that. So just not good. It wasn't good. The writing was not there. Not to say I didn't enjoy parts of the series. I did enjoy parts of it. But this was not up to par with even, I thought Jessica Jones was weak. But this was the worst of the 4 series by far. Punisher I'm looking forward to. I think Defenders will be good. The other thing that bothered me was we didn't see even one iota of the costume. Yeah, Luke Cage, you only saw, quote unquote, the traditional costume as a kind of a throwaway joke after the experiment at the prison when he escapes. But Daredevil got his costume. Jessica Jones, I don't think, has a traditional costume as far as I know. I'm not a big Jessica Jones fan or know much about her. But Iron Fist has a pretty iconic outfit. He's got that sort of pirate-esque, mask on the top. I guess you can call pirate-esque, and it's like he ties in the back, and he has, his little boots and everything else, and his little green outfit, and that wasn't to be seen. It wasn't to be seen at all, not even a hint of it. Yeah, the yellow and green. He did have the little dragon tattoo on his chest. He did have that. And he did use the Iron Fist every now and then, and it went away for plot convenience, which I thought, again, that was sort of, if that was the biggest sort of arc for the character, losing his chi because he has to get over his parents' death, that wasn't interesting to me at all. It just wasn't. So, it's still worth checking out. I think what I'd rather see is not Luke Cage Season 2 or Iron Fist Season 2. Go straight to Heroes for Hire, or go straight to the team-up of Luke Cage and Iron Fist. I think that'll be a much more interesting show for both characters to see how they interact. And I think they have to improve the writing of Danny and have him grow up a little bit, act more like, I hate to say, act like a man. Because a lot of times he was a little bit whiny and just unsure, and it's just, that's fine, it bits and pieces, but the character was written to be just wildly inconsistent in terms of, I thought, his like nobility. If this was a guy to be chosen to be Iron Fist, I didn't see why from his actions during the series. I just didn't. It was almost like he was play acting as, I should be the defender of the Mystic City of, was it Kunlun, and not, what didn't seem earned to me, if that makes sense. And what it might have been more interesting, hell, I hate to say it, maybe if he did the first like 2 or 3 episodes, him training and learning before he came to New York City. Maybe that could have been a way of doing it. It's too late now, so check it out. It's not terrible. I don't think it's as horrible as the reviews you've seen, but it's definitely not the best that Marvel's put out. And the actor's sort of, he's had some sort of a response. Finn Jones has had some response to the negativity about the series, and it wasn't the best response. He said this: I think the world has changed a lot since we were filming that television show. I'm playing a white American billionaire superhero at a time when the white American billionaire archetype is public enemy #1, especially in the U.S. We filmed the show way before Trump's election, and I think it's very interesting to see how that perception, now that Trump's in power, how it makes it very difficult to root for someone coming from white privilege when that archetype is public enemy #1. I don't think that's the case, because I don't see the public honestly turning against Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. because they like the way the character is written and how he's portrayed. And I think that owes to a lot. I don't think a character like Batman people are all of a sudden going to hate. That's a rich, white billionaire, so I think that's a kind of a cop-out from the actor, and I understand he doesn't want his first major sort of venture on his own, as, his first really big starring vehicle to be panned by critics, but no, Trump being elected is not why people have a problem with this show. The fact that he's a billionaire is probably, I think, the least of everyone's concerns when it comes to this show. It's the writing, for the most part, and it's the inconsistency, I think, of the characters, and it's the fact that I don't think the way this character was written, I don't think Danny was that interesting as a character the way it was written here, and that, it's hard to get that past audiences. I think that's what the main problem was here.